questions for
Please.
Senator Booker. So we, as thrilled to have you here, know that there's a lot of important things that are happening in the state. And so one of those is the student debt crisis,
Yes.
which hits New Hampshire particularly hard as being one of the highest student loan burden states for young people in the country.
Yes.
We really think about this almost as if it's indentured servitude that keeps young people from being able to save up, buy a house, really start their lives. So what would you do to address this? What ideas do you have?
Well, first of all, this is a national crisis. It is undermining our national strength and competitiveness globally. It has changed a whole generation. When baby boomers are around the age of millennials right now, young, they control about 30% of the wealth in America. For millennials now, they are controlling about 3 to 4% of the wealth in America. They have colossal amounts of debt now in the trillions of dollars. And the reason why I say this is competitive is because, think about this, the more educated a population is, the more economically competitive they compete against other nations who are trying to compete with us. Well, every one of our peer nations is doing everything they can to lower barriers to college. In Germany, it's between 0 and 4% of median income to go to college. In Canada, it is about 6 to 7% of median income. Here in the United States, it's between 50 and 60% of the median income of the family. And so this is changing our culture, literally. You have a generation of people that now are putting off other decisions. The people who build homes in America see this as the crisis it is because people are doing that less. So this is a national urgency, and we have to do something about it. And so, again, I'm a senator now, so I'm already fighting this. I have a bill that creates debt-free college that will eviscerate that. I have another bill of something that I think that everybody in this nation should have wealth by the time they turn 18. And an idea from both sides of the political aisle, which is just to give every single child born in America $1,000 in an interest-bearing account. And then every year of that child's life, like the earned income tax credit, they would get deposits into that account based upon their parents' income. For the average, for the lowest income kids, which 1 out of every 5 kids roughly in America is born at or below the poverty line, they would have upwards of $50,000 by the time they're 18, and that would scale all the way down depending on the wealth of families. That alone would give kids the ability to go to college, to buy homes, to invest in things that create generational wealth. And so from debt-free college, free county college, from having accelerated loan forgiveness programs for people going into public interest professions, if you're a teacher or a public defender, prosecutor, those decisions that people make often that give you less salaries than the private sector, we should be forgiving people's loans and incentivizing people into those decisions. So between my baby bonds bill, my debt-free college bill, between making sure that we have a loan forgiveness program that actually works for people, and then doing things for everybody who's carrying student loan right now. So right now is we have this unbelievable reality where the federal government is profiting to billions of dollars off of the student loan program. They're making money off of the backs of young people. That's going to end if I'm president of the United States, and we're going to make sure that we use that to reduce the debt burden of all Americans. And then people that have financial trouble. Remember, you can't refinance student debt in America. One of my first town halls here in New Hampshire, somebody raised their hand and they were paying double-digit percentages of interest on their debt. That's ridiculous. When you can refinance your auto loans, your mortgages, that's going to change under my presidency as well. And the last thing is, people have financial crises, and we have bankruptcy laws designed that these financial crises don't destroy families. But the one debt you can't discharge in bankruptcy is student loans as well. That's got to change. That's got to change also. So that's sort of my comprehensive way of dealing with this. But there's a lot of other things that I deal with. I just want to make mention of the fact that we are here because of an organization that's dealing with a crisis that my city was dealing with, which is young people who are growing up in that community, who get opportunities to go on to college, they don't come back. And my city was 60 years of losing its population. New Hampshire's losing its population. Iowa's losing its population. And we see, what you see is this pulling of young talent to certain geographic areas where richness of communities and cultures like this are losing out on that vitality. And we have to have a much bigger agenda to recognize the worth, the value of all places. And not only student debt is an issue, but there's so many other things. The housing crisis in America, we have to deal with it. We have a state like New Hampshire where so many people are housing insecure. And that's the common sense things that we can do. like we give a mortgage interest deduction in America and I'm okay with that. I support that, but it's overwhelmingly used by people who make more than $250,000 a year. It's taking our collective wealth as a society and shifting it to people who already have wealth. And I like that. I'm in favor of incentivizing home ownership. But what about for the renters? Do they get any kind of tax break? Under my leadership, my presidency, we're going to create a rental tax credit where people who want to stay in communities like this and want to teach in communities like this, they should be able to get a rental tax credit. My tax credit bill, if you're paying over 30% of your income on rent, you can qualify for a tax credit that would give 82,000 people in this state a tax break at an average, median average of $4,000 a year. And so these are common sense things we could be doing to make communities like this, communities like the one I live in currently, more affordable for more people, more inclusive, and to help to stimulate a housing market that also would be beneficial for people.
Victoria, since we're on the subject of housing, maybe we can ask you to go a little bit more in depth on the housing issue.
Absolutely. So it's fantastic that you brought up housing because, again, something that people in our state are incredibly conscious about. We know that those rental housing vacancy rates, specifically in New Hampshire, are less than 2% statewide. In some areas, they're as low as 1%. So it makes it extremely hard for young people to stay in our communities, to find apartments, and be able to afford to live here. What do you think can be done to make housing more affordable, specifically for young people who, as we've already talked about, are saddled with student loan debt and oftentimes are getting some of the lowest wages that are currently offered?
Again, so a lot of candidates will tell you what they want to do. These are issues I've had a history of having to deal with. I was the executive of New Jersey's largest city. And a lot of the crises, I always tell, we have a far more common pain than we know of in America, but we fail to turn that into a sense of common purpose. I was mayor in the middle of the global recession, talking about a housing crisis. And yet I said I was determined, I'm going to double the production of affordable housing in my city, even though a lot of the streams that builds affordable housing were disappearing. And we found all kind of creative ways to stimulate a housing market. That experience is going to make me a president that knows how to get affordable housing built. And we're going to do a lot of things. They're just common sense. This is not sexy, but it's what we can do to make America livable for everybody, like massively increasing the housing trust fund so that local communities have more resources. We want to make sure that we do things that stop communities that don't build affordable housing, often because of restrictive zoning. We want to hold people accountable for the kind of zoning laws that help the affordable housing be built. We want to give renters, creating more demand. That tax credit actually is going to create a greater demand. We want to make sure that we are doing things with people that are often losing their housing to help them stay in housing. Just by having legal counsel when you're facing eviction will drop your eviction rate of upwards of 70%. We want to make sure that we're creating a country that is building a supply, has a demand, and that has the resources to actually do the new construction that needs to be done. And then I don't want to leave this out because I got into politics. Look, I grew up in and we were sort of beginning to have this conversation. When I was a young man, housing rights and housing issues were at the core of my family's story. When we moved from the South up to this incredible mecca, I don't know if you've ever heard of it, it's called New Jersey. My parents were consistently denied housing in communities in 1969 because of the color of their skin. And what they found was an incredible group of activists, mostly white people, in that community that said, we're going to fight for you. And they started sending white couples behind my parents as volunteers. They would find out that the houses that they were looking at that they were told was sold were still for sale. In the house I grew up in, my parents were told it was sold. The white couple came, found out the house was still for sale, put a bid on the house, the bid was accepted, papers were drawn up, and on the day of the closing, the white couple didn't show up. My father did, and a volunteer lawyer, it's an incredible man, white man, and they confronted the real estate agent who didn't give up. He stands up and punches my dad's lawyer in the face and sings a dog on my father. And every time my dad would tell the stories, I was growing up in this beautiful home, the dog would get bigger. It's like, son, I had to find a pack of wolves to get you in this house. So my parents taught me what your families, I'm sure, taught you, that we all drink deeply from wells of liberty and freedom and opportunity that we didn't dig. And you can't pay it back to those Americans that sacrificed for rights that all of us take for granted, workers' rights, women's rights. And so I went off an earnest guy. You mentioned my resume, Stanford. I got into Stanford, by the way, 4.0, 1,600, 4.0 yards per carry, 1,600 receiving yards. I was an All-American football player, but stayed and got my master's, overseas study, came home. My dad was not impressed when I was in law school. He said, boy, You got more degrees in the month of July, but you're not hot. Because life isn't about the degrees you get, it's about the service you give. And so I moved to Newark, New Jersey. I'm the only United States senator that lives in a community at or below the poverty line where we don't mistake wealth with worth. Where I see the everyday absurdity to live in a nation where my neighbors, many of them work longer hours than my parents did. And they can't afford market rent. They need food stamps. I see the dignity stripping endeavor that to be working full-time jobs, catching extra shifts, and still need food stamps. Where is the economic justice in this country that you can do everything right, but you can still find yourself in a community where the gun violence, Shahad Smith murdered with an assault rifle on my block, where you don't know if the water coming out of your tap is clean. 3,000 places in America, jurisdictions, have more than twice the blood lead level of Flint, Michigan. Here in New Hampshire, clean water is a driving issue as PFASs and other things are threatening the safety of our children and our families. Where is the justice when you have a criminal justice system that, as Brian Stevenson says, treats you better if you're rich and guilty than if you're poor and innocent? And God forbid you have a serious mental illness or an addiction, because you're not going to be treated with health care or treatment. You're more likely to end up in jails and prisons and not have those issues addressed. All the things that we heap against the most vulnerable people. Why do I live in Newark, New Jersey? Because I didn't get into politics because of some vanity play. This is not about elections. They matter and have consequences, but at the end of the day, this is about us. This election is not a referendum on one guy in one office. It's a referendum on who we are and who we're going to be to each other. And I know the urgency many people feel to beat Donald Trump. I feel that urgency, but beating Donald Trump is the floor. It's not the ceiling. It gets us out of a ditch. It doesn't get us to the mountaintop. I got in politics because we as a people must get to the mountaintop. And so all of these issues we're talking about, to me, they go to the core of the values of this election. We need a revival of civic grace. We need a more courageous empathy for one another. We need our civic spaces and our policies to respect the moral values at the core of this country. I'm sorry, we can talk policy all you want, and I love it. I'm a nerd policy wonk, Star Trek, Star Wars geek. But this is not about the head. And I'll tell you this, maybe you're not going to hear this from other presidential candidates, but I'm the guy on that stage or in this race that knows most of the candidates. We're friends. I was texting with Yang the other day. I serve in the Senate with other folks. I was sworn in by Joe Biden. And let me tell you about all of them. This is why I get so mad when candidates or anybody attacks the character of the people running. We have great people running in this primary. I work on bills with them. I admire them. Whoever president is better steal the best ideas that we've all put out there and put them into place. It's not about the head simply. It's about the heart and the spirit. Who's going to revive the spirit? And let me say something controversial that I might lose some of you right now. It's not about how much you hate Donald Trump. In fact, King said this, darkness can't drive out darkness, only light can do that. Hate can't drive out hate, only love can do that. This election, to me, is about the biggest and greatest ideal of this nation, evidenced in people willing to die together from beaches of Normandy to Goodman, Cheney, and Schwerner, different race, different religions, who died in Mississippi. This is about the real definition of patriotism, which is love of country, but you can't love your country unless you love your fellow countrymen and women. And love is not sentimentality, it's not weak. Love says if your kids don't have a great public school to go to, my kids are lesser off. Love says if your parent is retired and living in poverty because their social security checks don't go far enough, then that is a threat to my family. Love says we're all in this together, that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. The leaders in our country that best ignite that moral imagination, like civil rights activists did, suffrage activists did, fighters from Stonewall did, they challenge us to be who we say we are. That's the election that will get us beyond partisan politics to the new American majorities we need to actually solve the great problems of our generation, from climate change to gun violence to economic justice. When we ignite that grace and that empathy and that love in this nation again, that's when we will make leap forwards and make us truly a nation of liberty and justice for all.